Week one of DFS in the books, and week two is here. My partner Ryan had a big week in week one. We'll talk about that and a lot more, and break down the entire week two slate. All coming up next on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Happy Friday morning, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Friday morning DFS version. We appreciate you either jumping on live here in the chat, jumping on live in the video, listening to the audio version, wherever it may be. We appreciate that. If you could please rate and review the podcast, that also helps us, helps a lot, help people find the podcast, etc. I am Scott Jenstad, joined as always on Friday mornings by Ryan Belongia. Ryan, a good start for you last week, huh? You sent me some screenshots. Sounds like week one was a winner for you.
Yeah, week one went well. It was interesting because the main slate went poorly, and so did cash. I didn't end up on Saquon Barkley in cash, and he was very popular, so I lost that right away. And then in the GPPs, I had a lot of Elijah Mitchell. He got hurt right away. I had a lot of the Bengals. They were struggling. Got some other things wrong, so it was looking like it was going to be a tough day. But then I played the afternoon slate. And I checked, I don't sweat it. I don't sweat the scores on DraftKings. I don't watch, the money go up and down and the points go. I kind of know where I am. So I brought it up in the fourth quarter and I was winning like $35,000 or something. I was like, wow, I mean, how is this even possible? Turns out not many people use the Mahomes, Kelsey, and Justin Jefferson combo, sort of like the three most expensive players in the afternoon slate. There was other ones too, like the Raiders and the Chargers were on that slate, so they got quite a bit of ownership too. But anyways, yeah, I ended up finishing third in the $100 single entry and eighth in the 333. It was close to being a really good day, but can't complain. That'll pay for some entry fees for a few weeks.
Yeah, no doubt. That's awesome. You sent me the screenshots. I was fired up. So yeah, the moral of that story is listen to Ryan rather than me, and you're good to go as we go forward here. But no, that's awesome. It's always good to start a week one really well. I just played the main slate. I had one really bad team. I had one that hit all the little blue snowflakes on the thing. I had Kadarius Toney. I had Eli Mitchell. I had T Higgins. Like two of those guys got hurt. Tony played 7 snaps, which is wow, he actually looked good when he played. He got the ball twice, looked pretty electric, and didn't play at all. So that was weird. But my secondary team was actually really good. It was a Hurts and Saquon team, which worked out really nicely. So one good, one bad. I'll take that for week one. But let's jump into week two. It's kind of interesting. We have a number of games off the slate. We obviously had the Chargers and Chiefs last night. Pretty good game with a lot of big names. Then we got Bears and Packers on Sunday night. But then we have 2 Monday night games. We have the Titans and Bills. So all the Bills are off the slate. And then we have a really fun game in Vikings Eagles. A lot of fun players that are on the slate too. So it's interesting that there's 2 Monday night games. It's apparently some sort of ESPN deal with their max or their minimum number of games they needed. But we have 12 games on our slate, 7 early, 5 late. So a pretty good even split there. Another week, Ryan, where we do not have a lot of games with high totals. We're going to have to pick and choose and find some games to target here, find some players to target. There are only 2 games that are over 48 points. We have the Cardinals and Raiders in the afternoon at 51.5. And the game that everybody thought would be a high total when we heard the schedule, the Commanders and the Lions, 48.5 also. So, a little bit always helps you have a little bit lack of defense. But are you in on Cardinals Raiders as a game we're going to talk about and stack here, as I imagine a lot of people will be?
Yeah, it's hard not to be. The only game with a total over 50, and we just targeted these Cardinals against the Chiefs, and that worked out very well. The Raiders looked pretty good in week one. At least Carr and Adams looked good. So yeah, it seems like a great spot for the Raiders to put up a lot of points on the Cardinals. It'll be a popular target, but it's one of those where I'm not going to overthink it again, and I'm definitely going to play some of that game.
Yeah, I was surprised just how awesome Devontae looked, and I probably shouldn't be. I mean, the guy's been so good for so long, but 17 targets, led the NFL in targets in week one, and you watch some of his routes, and he was smoking dudes out there. I just thought Carr kind of didn't play very well. He had 3 interceptions, a couple in the second half, so he definitely focused in on Devontae, had a couple of balls he missed to Waller that would have been big plays, so I think it's a really nice bounce-back spot for him. You saw Mahomes. I mean, obviously Mahomes is awesome, but had 0 issue with this Arizona defense. Sounds like J.J. Watt's not going to play play again. He has not practiced all week, so I don't think he's gonna get in there. So that's a really good spot. How do you feel about Commanders Lions? 48.5. The Lions are coming off a game with Philly where there were 73 total points in that game. They lost 38-35. Washington coming off a game with 50 points. I think it was 28-22 with them in Jacksonville. Do you think this is worthy of being the second highest total on the slate this week?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, there isn't much else besides.
There isn't. Yeah, it's not hard to get above some of these games.
Yeah, and neither of these defenses are that great, and the Lions always seem to be in these faster paced games with a lot of points. So it makes sense. Yeah, it seems like it's going to be pretty popular. I don't know. Like I'm not excited about playing Wentz or Goff.
For 313 and 4 touchdowns for Wentz last week.
Yeah, I think those stacks are fine, but I'll probably just look to get a piece here or there from that game. If it's going to be popular, I'll look somewhere else.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way too. I think a piece here and there, but I don't think it's going to be a game I'm going to heavily attack. We do have a lot of games with low over-unders, 4 especially stick out. We've got the Niners and Seattle, and we're going to talk about that game in a second here. I want to talk about the 49ers, but that's a 41. The Jets and Browns are 40. New England and Pittsburgh, a game that 5 years ago would have been highlighting this slate, is 40. And Cincy and Dallas, obviously with the Dak Prescott injury, that's a game that I think 2 weeks ago would have been like, that's going to be a great game to target. We got the Bengals and the Cowboys. That's going to be at least a 51, 52, 54, somewhere in their game. 41.5 that game as we see Cooper Rush taking snaps for the Cowboys.
Yeah, tough to have interest in those games. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the Niners because there's some interesting options in the Niners game. Trey Lance seems like he's going to be a relatively popular option, at least in cash games. And then the Bengals Cowboys. Yeah, that's too bad about Dak, but it looks like a pretty good spot for Joe Mixon. I see Cooper Rush having some struggles, and Bengals probably have good field position quite often, probably get a lead, probably lean on Mixon. But yeah, other than that, I don't love those 4 games.
Yeah, me either. They're definitely low. I mean, it's interesting because Dallas, even before Dak got hurt, looked terrible on offense too. It's not like they were rolling and Dak got hurt. I mean, they had 3 points and he got hurt late in the game and kind of finished it off anyway. But yeah, that's rough there. But let's jump into who we think are getting popular plays this week. We'll talk some chalk here. But first, a note from our sponsors at Bettle. Be honest, you care more about your fantasy football team than you do about your hometown team. But playing in a season-long league can sometimes feel like dating in your hometown. The same faces year in and year out. Enter Bettle. In Bettle's arena, you can import your season-long lineup to play anyone on our network in a weekly match for real money. With just a couple of clicks, you'll be matched with hundreds of other players with similar lineups that you can choose to challenge week in and week out. We know you spend hours every week pulling over your roster, so why limit yourself? Enter the arena and send your first $10 match to receive a $50 bonus from us straight to your account. Offers only eligible for your first match. Bonus funds need to be used in future matches and cannot be withdrawn. Go to bettle.co/RotoWire. That's bettle.co/RotoWire to sign up and import your team today. That's bettle.co/RotoWire. See you in the arena. So, Ryan, let's talk about who we think would be the popular plays. We'll get through this, fairly quick, kind of do one each, and then we'll get into, really breaking down some stacks and players we like. But at quarterback, if you're thinking, I'm looking at the slate here, who jumps out to me? I think it's a valuable exercise. Last week, we looked at Michael Pittman was so obvious at 5,500. We're like, this is just stupidly underpriced to the point that I think you just play him and eat it, and he did really well. But at quarterback, who kind of sticks out to you this week as the most popular play?
Yeah, I think it's going to be more spread around than usual. We don't have the expensive options that we normally have, at least the ones that people like to play, like the Josh Allens, Mahomes, Herbert, those types of guys. And there's some cheaper guys that are in good spots. Derek Carr, for one, 6,200. I think people will look to him even in cash games. And then, I mentioned briefly, Trey Lance, 5,700 and home against Seattle. Now they don't have Eli Mitchell anymore. And he's projected, relatively popular for cash games because of the rushing upside. I mean, he carried at least 10 times last week, get 13 times, 54 yards. I mean, people love that for 5,700, especially when you're playing for a home favorite.
Yeah, it's funny. Those are the 2 I had listed on the chalk plays right there. I think a lot of people are going to go to Carr. I love the Carr stack this week. The Arizona defense was shredded last week. Everybody's going to be like, oh, that was Kansas City. I just think the Arizona defense is bad. I said it last week. I think this team is overrated. I think their defense is really, really bad. And I think Carr will bounce back nicely this week. The Trey Lance thing is interesting. I am so freaking tired of Trey Lance, and it's week 2. Like, I'm just so tired of the talk. I didn't like them keeping Garoppolo just for this reason. I thought that, like, there was an article on, I think it was Jason Luck on 4 this morning, the Washington Post. Like, yeah, if they lose this week, Jimmy's going to start game 3. Like, the whole thing is so absurd. That game was in a freaking monsoon in the first quarter and fourth quarter last week. And everybody's like, oh, well, the rain stopped in the middle. Yeah. And they were leading and they kept running the ball and you couldn't even make cuts. Like, the field was horrible. I don't know what's going on in that Chicago field. It was some kind of new Bermuda grass, but like just didn't drain. Like, by the fourth quarter, there were literally standing puddles all over the field. So I don't know what's going on there, but I really think you have to throw that game out. I thought he had some mistakes, and I thought he had some really good plays too. He had a ball to Ayuk, a ball to Juwan Jennings, like balls that, like, you drop back and like, well, Jimmy can't make that throw. And then you get a 3rd and 13 and he runs for 14. I'm like, well, that's a sack if Jimmy's playing. So I think it's weird. It's just weird to me that it's not like Trey Lance is starting in front of Joe Namath or Joe Montana or Tom Brady. Like, it's Jimmy Garoppolo, who I like as a person. I think he's a serviceable starting quarterback on the, bottom 10 quarterbacks, but a serviceable starting quarterback if over some guys. But like, what are we doing here? Like, this is not a savior. This is the guy who has the worst fourth quarter playoff passer rating in the last 30 years in the NFL. Like, I get that he's fine and won't make a ton of mistakes, but there's zero upside here. You have to let Lance play. If they pull him earlier in the year, I think it's just a gigantic mistake. But we're talking DFS. We're talking week 2 here. There's a lot of pressure, weirdly, already on Trey, which is why another reason why I just didn't think bringing Jimmy back would made sense. She's like, suddenly we're in week 2 and you got a pressure situation. There's supposed to be weather again, believe it or not. Apparently, this rain cloud is just following the 49ers. Apparently, there's an 80% chance of rain on Sunday in California, which doesn't happen very often. So you wonder if that's an issue. I'm going to check the weather. If it looks fine on Sunday, I think I'm going to play Lance at 5,700 and kind of just figure that it's time to break out. It's against a defense that Russell Wilson just threw for 340 yards against on Monday night. I worry always with the 49ers how conservative they will go, but no Mitchell maybe helps that a little bit. Yeah, I think I'm playing Trey at the price this week. And last week I mentioned I wasn't, so I'm not being a biased 49ers fan here. I think it's time to unleash him as long as the weather looks good on Sunday morning.
Yeah, I'm on board too. I think I'm going to play him too. And I agree. They're doing him a disservice by having Jimmy there still, having him look over his shoulder. Yeah. The rumors of Jimmy coming in. I agree. That's terrible for a young quarterback like him. But anyways, I'm going to be on him too. I think Eli Mitchell being out, helps a lot. You want those extra rushes and those extra passing attempts. What do you think about? Is it going to be Jeff Wilson? Is he like the main guy?
I think so, but I like Jeff Wilson, but I think Jeff Wilson's just a guy. I think that you look at I think he had 4 games last year where he started and he was healthy and Eli was out, and he had 17 plus touches in 3 of those 4. Just didn't do a lot with him. He's one of those guys that if he scores, you're fine. But he's just a guy that's going to get 4 yards of carry. They like him. He's smart. He's in the right place all the time. And then I think you're going to get Jordan Mason and I can't say his name, Ty Davis Price, who are going to be, as Shanahan's there in the week, I'm just going to kind of ride the hot hand for the second running back. So I think if a guy, hits a nice play, I think Price is really just big and tough and strong. And Mason, they really liked in the preseason. I think those guys will mix in. I think it's going to be a little more committee than everybody wants with Wilson. But if Wilson scores, I think he works for fantasy. But if not, I think it's like a, 15 for 66 kind of game is what you're looking at. And look at Mitchell last week is running like 7 yards a carry. I mean, Trey being the quarterback, you got to put a spy on him. It just opens big hole for Mitchell. It's frustrating. Mitchell looked really good early, and he's just a good player, just can't stay healthy. Yeah,
that's too bad. And, I know we had these spots with Wilson last season because Mitchell's always a little bit banged up. And it seems like Mitchell sort of failed as the chalky play every time, or he's not going to be chalky this week, or at least a relatively popular play. Yeah, I think I'm off that too. He's not Eli Mitchell. I always think, 5,100 for Eli Mitchell as a replacement, but it's not the same.
Yeah. Mitchell's definitely a better running back than the rest of these guys right now. I think with Mason and Davis Price, we may see something different, but I think Jeff Wilson is, solid as the guy. There's other guys down that range. I think I'm going to play ahead of him. But let's talk about running back. There were like 4 guys that I jumped up the page to me, but who, just starting from a chalk play, who do you think is going to be the most popular running back on the slate this week?
I'm leaning towards Saquon. Pretty good matchup at home, and he had such a huge game last week.
And
Caught
freaking
six balls,
looked awesome too. He looked
yeah,
great.
he looked great. Rushed for 164 yards. Yeah, so I think people are feeling positive about Saquon right now. He projects well, and they'll probably just ride it again this week. What about you?
Yeah, I had two guys listed. You've actually mentioned both of them already. I think this Saquon at 7,300 is there for sure. And then I love Joe Mixon this week at 7,200 at Dallas. The wild thing about it, I know Cincinnati ran like a million plays last week, but they were trailing most of that game against Pittsburgh. He still had 34 touches, this running back. He had 9 targets. Dallas allowed 5.2 yards per carry to Tampa last week. Just a great game script for Mixon. They clearly want to get him involved at all times. They love him to touch the ball. 7,200. I think Barkley and Mixon, you jump off the page pretty good. When you got the expensive guys are really high up there this week. I think Jonathan Taylor's 9,900. I mean, it's just a drop down $2,500 to Saquon and Joe Mixon. I think makes a huge difference to me.
Oh, me too. I just I can't do that. I love Taylor and it's a good spot. And he had 30 some touches last week. I know 35 touches. I know that game went to overtime. He projects really well in that matchup, but 9,900, he's going to have to score at least 30 again. I mean, he scored 30 last week and he wasn't on the winning lineup in I want to say most tourneys, but many tourneys because, other guys scored 25, 28 and that's a big price tag to pay off. And then
I think he's 800 more than he was last week too.
Yeah, 800 more than last week. And then you got McCaffrey. I wanted to mention I wanted to get your thoughts on McCaffrey. I wanted to just fade him too. I like these guys a little bit lower that we just talked about and some guys even below that. And McCaffrey, I don't know. I need to see it with Baker first. I don't know. I don't know why he touched the ball 14 times or whatever and caught a few dump offs, but yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking about fading him as well.
It was a weird week where his best play was a fumble that he picked up and ran for 30 yards. So he didn't get credit for it, but it was a weird game. I imagine they'll feed him a little more, but yeah, at 8,900, there's just so many guys, and we'll talk about it more as we get to running backs. There's so many guys that are cheaper that are like just as much as the top guys. I don't think I'm going to get there this week either. What about receiver? Who's going to be the most popular receiver out there this week?
I think Devontae. That seems like an easy one. 1,300 cheaper than Cup, and you mentioned league high 17 targets last week and a great spot against Arizona. There's a few guys in the mid range. I don't know. I'll let you name one or two that are probably going to be popular too.
Yeah, and we'll get fully in the mid range. We talk receivers. My guy, someone I wanted to ask you about actually. At 4,600, do you think everybody's going to play Curtis Samuel this week in the game that is the second highest total? He had 11 targets last week. Also had 4 carries for the Commanders. He had 4 carries of 17 yards. He was 855 and a touchdown. At 4,600, do you think a lot of people gravitate towards Samuel? Do you think people are still scarred from the last 4 or 5 years when we were always waiting for the Curtis Samuel breakout?
Well, I think both of those. Yeah. I think some people are scarred and I think people gravitate toward him. Yes. Yeah, especially in tournaments. I don't think it'll end up being quite as popular if just let me check. I think Chris Godwin is out and Julio Jones is also banged up. So like Russell Gage may be in a good spot I've seen. And then one other cheap guy that will take some of that ownership away from Samuel and those other guys is what's his name? Greg Dortch, I believe.
When we talk cheap receivers,
we'll get there. But I just mean we have some other value, so it'll keep guys like Samuel down a little bit.
Yeah, I think he'll be the most popular of that group, but you're probably right. There's probably enough names down there that he's not going to just be like an auto play for people. But I think 11 targets and 4 runs. I think in a game that's the second highest game, everybody's going to want, maybe like we talked before, maybe not stack that game, but want a piece or two of it. He just seems like the easy, cheap way to get a piece of that game. What about tight end? Anybody jump out to you as like everybody's going to have this guy this week?
Yeah, I don't know.
I was going to say, talking about scarring, is Kyle Pitts going to be popular again, or is everybody scarred after last week?
I don't think Kyle Pitts is going to be popular this week. Okay. I think in that range, it would be Waller, but I think for cash games, it's going to be Albert O or Tyler Higbee. I'm not sure, but those are the two that seem to be projecting the best. The Broncos are in a pretty good spot at home. Albert O had 6 targets last week, and he's only 3,700. So I think people will consider him for cash games. And Higbee too after 11 targets against the Bills.
We rarely talk defense in this part of the show. We're talking high percentage plays, but we've got a situation here where a quarterback got hurt on Sunday. The defense he's playing against is essentially min price. The Cincinnati defense is 2,200. Is everybody just going to click Cincinnati D this week as starting out their lineup and move on?
Yes. They're going to be massive chalk.
I think so too.
In cash games, you just play them and don't even think about it. Again, for cash games, you want to follow the chalk. You want to, when in doubt, you play the guy that's going to be more popular. For tournaments, though, we'll get to defense, but there's some other cheap defenses down here that you can take a shot on. Now, I don't mind if you want to just plug in the Bengals and move on. That's fine too, but it might be a spot to get some leverage on the field. And, the Bengals only end up scoring 4 or 5 points.
I think a tournament's a spot to go elsewhere. We'll talk about that later, but there are some defenses I'd rather play, but I think they're going to be at 2,200 against Cooper Rush. I think they're going to be insanely popular.
Yep.
So what about some game stacks? We've kind of talked about who's popular. What are you thinking? You kind of start filling your lineup. Here's my quarterback, my receiver, my run back. Where are you kind of gravitating towards to start a main lineup for you?
Okay, so we both mentioned the Raiders and the Cardinals.
That's my top one too.
Me too. Yeah. And it's like I said with the Chiefs last week, it's the obvious spot. I'm not going to overthink it. I'm going to play that game. So that's going to be one of them. Obviously love the Carr, Devontae Adams, Waller. I'll probably avoid Hunter Renfrow. I think at least at that price tag, Devontae Adams being there now really hurts Renfrow around the goal line.
Yeah, I think with Adams and Waller healthy, it suddenly gets a little squeezed for Renfrow that wasn't a lot of times wasn't there last year.
Yeah, so I'll pick a different game. I briefly mentioned it, but I do kind of like the Broncos here, coming off that loss to the Seahawks at home in Seattle, and now Russ gets his first game at home. He looked pretty good, and the thing I like about this stack is all of his playmakers are still underpriced. Like Judy, 5,600. He's going to be $1,000 more than that soon. And Sutton will be more expensive too. I mean, I figure these guys will be similar to the way DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett were in Seattle. And then I mentioned Albert O is cheap as well. So you can stack Russ with 2 of these guys. I mean, you could even stack Russ with 3 of these guys if you really want to go for it. But then Houston's also got some guys to run it back with. Rex Burkhead projects okay because he got, I think, 8 targets and seems to be the lead back there. Like, he'd be fine as a run back. I think my favorite is Cooks, though.
Yeah.
Cooks projects as one of the best receivers on the slate, just from a point per dollar perspective, because they really have no one. If you look, Rex Burkhead is their feature back. They have OJ Howard and Brevin Jones at tight end. I mean, Cooks is basically their only weapon. So he's a guy that should get 10 targets every week, maybe more. So I think this Broncos stack is really nice. What about you? Where are you looking besides the Raiders?
Cooks had 12 targets last week. It's funny because I have my list here and I was like Raiders and then I had Broncos. I did not think you were going to take the Broncos. I really like that one. You wonder how much they're going to have to throw, but I just think that they got to let Russ do his thing. I think after last week, all the comments, why'd you get the field goal instead of just letting Russ play? I think they just let Russ play this week. Home game. I think that Houston should be able to do enough to make it so it's not 35-3 where they just run a bunch. But as we talk about running backs, I do really like Javonte Williams this week too, where I don't play Wilson. So I'm going to drop down to my sneakier stack, and one that I don't think many people are going to play, but I actually like the Rams on a bounce back this week. Stafford is 6,300. Kupp's really expensive, but Allen Robinson is intriguing. He's 5,500. He was horrible in week 1. He had 1 catch for 12 yards on 2 targets. But we think we have a little squeaky wheel here. Sean McVay pretty much said after the game, I got to figure out how to get Robinson more involved. He was out there the whole time. It just didn't work. So I think Stafford with Kupp or even Stafford with Robinson, then you could throw Higbee in there too, I think works. But I like the run backs too. I like Drake London coming back if they're trailing. I think that he's kind of the only receiver they have. They throw to, got a bunch of targets last week. And I do like Kyle Pitts as a run back too. I think that, Jalen Ramsey can't guard both these guys. And, whoever doesn't get a lot of Ramsey should do well. But I do like Pitts on a bounce back too as a run back. So I think that I think the Rams will be very, very overlooked. They were horrible week 1. People were worried about Stafford's elbow, but he threw the ball 41 times. I didn't think the elbow looked like a problem as I was watching the game. They just got beat by the Bills more than anything. And I think Cup's the easy one to run back with. You can do it because Stafford's 6,300. You come back. London and Pitts are both in the low 5,000s. It's pretty easy to fit him in if you want to. But I think if you want to go Allen Robinson and then throw in a tight end there, I think that works too. And it's one that I don't think anybody's going to have this week.
No, I love that one. I think you're spot on. I think that's the overlooked stack this week. We saw Ram stacks won a bunch of tournaments the first few weeks of the season last year. And no one's going to be on it. The one thing I'll add to that, if you stack the Rams, the way that Stafford's usually on winning lineups is he's throwing for over 300 with at least 3 touchdowns. So I think you want to use him with 2 pass catchers. Yeah, Kupp and Allen Robinson, Kupp and Higbee, or even leave Kupp out and, Allen Robinson and Higbee. But yeah, if you stack up the Rams, definitely use 2 pass catchers with Stafford.
I think that makes sense. He doesn't have that rushing upside that the other guys do. And I do like the fact that I don't love their running backs either. Like, I think Darrell Henderson played a lot and was fine. Cam Akers obviously didn't play at all. He had 3 carries in that game. So, I like the fact that even if they get up, they don't have like a Jonathan Taylor can hand it to over and over. So I think that they keep throwing a little bit. Are there any other sneakier stacks you like? How do you feel? I want to ask you, how do you feel about everybody's going Carr and Devontae? How do you feel about playing the other side of that game and going Kyler with Hollywood Brown, something like that, and coming back with one of the Raiders pass catchers?
Yeah, I think it makes a ton of sense from like a game theory and leverage perspective. No one's really going to do that. People don't like rostering Murray at the moment, especially when he's the most expensive QB. But it's a little easier this week because you might, part of the reason why it's always tough to roster Kyler is because he never targets a guy that often. Like when he had Hopkins would be getting 5-6 targets. Now, if they have all these guys out, you can kind of easily just pair him with Marquise Brown or pair him with Dortch, or I guess you could try Zach Ertz if you want. Apparently he's healthy, but yeah, I don't know if I'll go there, but I think it makes perfect sense for game theory.
You got to think their defense is giving up a bunch of points. He's going to have to throw the whole second half. I just think that I think it's a really interesting way to stack this game, but being on the other side of the popularity scope on it. And you can still come back with, Devontae or Waller or something like that. I think it kind of lines up really well. And I think you're right on Kyler being the most expensive quarterback. I just think people are going to scroll past that. There's going to be so easy to get to Carr, to get to Lance, to get to Daniel Jones if you want to play him off a pretty good week last week. Carson Wentz is under 6,000. If you want to play Wentz or Goff in that matchup, the second highest total. I just think that I think for a game in the highest total, I think Kyler will be pretty under rostered.
Yep, agreed.
Anybody else quarterback wise you like before we jump into the running backs?
No, you just mentioned him. I was going to briefly mention Daniel Jones, but he's only 5,100. So yeah, like as far as those 5K quarterbacks, the guys below Trey Lance, Jones projects pretty well. So I think you could use him if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, Carolina was good against the pass last year and played well last week, but that was against Jacoby Brissett, and I'm not putting much into that. And Jones had 2 touchdowns last week, and he always has that rushing upside. I know Saquon's back, so you're probably not get the goal line carries, but he still has that bootleg from the 5-yard in. And the thing I like with him and Saquon is Saquon catches the ball. So a Saquon big play doesn't mean that Daniel Jones doesn't do anything. It could be a dump off that he breaks out. So I think that if you want to get really cheap, I think Jones is an interesting way to go. Let's jump into running backs. So first, a note from our sponsors at Vivid Seats. Hey, football fans, get your jerseys on, your tailgate snacks ready. That's right, NFL season is back, and so is your chance to score tickets with Vivid Seats. Download the Vivid Seats app or visit vividseats.com to see your team's schedule, compare tickets, and secure a spot in the stands. As the only ticketing company with a rewards program, Vivid Seats is the winning app for NFL fans just like you. Earn credit when you buy 10 tickets, then cash it in to catch more games all season long. With tickets from Vivid Seats, you'll go from watching the game to being part of it. Go to vividseats.com or find us in the App Store to browse unbeatable seats. We'll see you in the stadium. Sorry, it's the middle of the day here. My phone's ringing. But Ryan, what about running backs? We kind of touched on it a little bit. There are some expensive guys this week. Jonathan Taylor's 9,900. Christian McCaffrey's 8,900. You drop down Alvin Kamara off the rough game is 7,400. Then there's a bunch of guys in the low 7,000s I do like. We talked about Barkley and Mixon already. What do you think in this expensive range? It just feels like to me the top 2 guys are so far above price the other guys. I think I just kind of go in the 7,000s to start there.
Yeah, me too. Mentioned that we were going to fade Taylor and McCaffrey just because of the price. And then about 6 of these guys look really good. We mentioned Barkley and Mixon, and pretty much all the guys below that. It was just Swift. He had a huge week last week. Good matchup, high total. Connor. He's going to get a ton of usage in the game with the highest total on the slate. Fournette projects really well catching passes, especially with Godwin out. He got like all the work last week. So I think you can go to all those guys. And then, I don't know, Chubb would be the forgotten guy in there. People, I guess, are high on the Jets run defense this year, just the Jets defense in general. But yeah, I think all of those guys are good options. If I was leaning towards one, I don't mind, using Connor in a Raiders stack. But I really like the two guys that we mentioned at the start, Barkley and Mixon. I don't know. I mean, who do you, is one of these guys better than the others for you? I know you like Javonte.
Yeah, I really like those two, and then I do like Nick Chubb too. I think that Kareem Hunt scored the 2 touchdowns last week, but Chubb looked awesome. I thought him and Saquon were the running backs who looked the best last week. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor too, but Chubb was 22 for 141 rushing. And I know he didn't catch passes; he caught 1 pass, but they're a home favorite. They're a pretty decent sized home favorite against the Jets. A really nice game script for them to run the ball a lot in the second half. You mentioned, I think you're looking at percentages. He's kind of the forgotten guy here. If he's the forgotten guy this week, I do really like him. You mentioned DeAndre Swift. He looked great too. 8 touches for 175 yards and a touchdown. I know Jamal Williams vultured a couple TDs at the goal line to kind of bug people, but and Swift had a little bit of a banged up injury this week, but he said he's going to be fine. I think it was a hip issue. Washington was horrible against Jacksonville running backs last week. James Robinson scored twice. Travis Etienne should have scored twice. Trevor Lawrence missed him on a pass, and then he dropped one later. You're right. This range is just chock full of guys. I do not like Connor this week, actually. I didn't think he looked great last week. He scored, but he was only 10 for 26. I just don't love him in a game where they might be trailing and have to throw a bunch. I worry a little bit. He's just so touchdown dependent. And he seems to always get there. Seems like he scored every week last week. But dropping down a little bit, I do really like Javonte Williams at 6,500. This is a really nice game script for them as a decent-sized favorite against Houston. I just thought he looked really good last week, too. He had 38 snaps. Melvin Gordon played 27, so he does split time. But I know he fumbled at the goal line, but so did Melvin Gordon. They had that back-to-back drives where they both fumbled inside the 5. But he was 7 for 43 rushing, so 6 yards a carry there. He had 12 targets last week. He had 11 catches, 65 yards. Not super efficient, but I know they were trailing. But if Russell Wilson's going to look for him out of the backfield that much, I think at 6,500 he's going to be a PPR monster this year.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think I mentioned the Broncos stack. Pretty much no one is going to pair Russ with Javonte. I think they're going to use one or the other, either go to the running game or the passing game. So I'll probably make a couple lineups with Russ, Javonte, and then one of the pass catchers. And
interesting.
Hope Russ throws Javonte a touchdown, because if he does and then they get up, then Javonte goes over 100 in the fourth quarter and then he finishes with 25 fantasy points or something. So that can work too, and that'll make you just immediately different than the field. And just to cap off your point about Chubb, which I totally agree with, he's for sure going to be the least popular from Saquon, Mixon, Swift, Connor, Fournette, Javonte. All of them are going to be more popular than Chubb. So if Chubb,
I love that. I love him as a play already, and I love him even more now.
Me too. And so all Chubb has to do really is outscore those 3 or 4 guys. I mean, he can do that easily, and you are just off and running in tournaments.
I love Chubb this week, and now that you said that, I like him a little bit more. So I think that's I like pairing Chubb with 2 of these guys. I think it's a week where you could play 3 running backs too. I usually like to go 4 wide receivers in DraftKings with the full PPR, but I think this range right here is so well priced. I think you could play 3 of these guys and get away with it pretty well too. In the cheaper range, in the 5,000 say or low 6,000s. Someone like Najee Harris, I have no interest in. I know he seems way underpriced, 6,200, but all the injury stuff just worries me too much. He's dealing with so much stuff right now. I just don't think I could play him. Cordero Patterson looked really good last week. Damian Williams started the game for Atlanta, but then got hurt, and Cordero had 136 yards. A tough matchup against the Rams, but tough matchup against the Saints last week. He did well. Who do you like down here? We've got Josh Jacobs in that game with the Raiders. We haven't really talked about much. Nice game script there. Travis Etienne, we kind of mentioned. We mentioned Jeff Wilson at 5,100. What are you doing in this bottom range? I know the 6,500 to 700 range is so good. Are you finding yourself dropping down here? What are you doing?
I'm trying not to drop down here, but there are some options. Like Jacobs is okay if you want to target the running game, or if you want to not play Adams or Waller, it's okay. I don't know if I'll do that. The guy who I think is going to be relatively popular in cash games is Henderson, just because he saw all the work last week and he's only 5,700 and it's such a good matchup. I mean, he was pretty chalky in these spots last year and he projects as the best back in this range. Yeah, you mentioned ATN. I know you liked him last week. Really unlucky not to score.
Yeah,
I mean,
Lawrence missed him. It was such a bad pass by Lawrence.
Oh, man. He overthrew him by 5-10 feet.
Yeah, horrible.
Yeah, I don't love any of these guys. I think Chase Edmonds is interesting. He got a lot of the work and he's going to catch balls. But we didn't talk about that game yet. I think that's okay if you're playing Lamar and Anderson or Andrews maybe, but nothing's really jumping out. I don't know. Is there one guy here that you're looking to play in this 5K range?
I really like Miami-Baltimore as like an NFL game to watch. I don't love it as a fantasy game this week. I just I don't fully trust Tua. I know he had a couple of good plays last week, and Tyreek looked good. We'll talk about receivers in a second. I just don't love. If I were to play some of this game, it'd probably be Edmonds at 5,200. The guy I kind of like down here that I don't think anybody will play, because I think a lot of people will play Jeff Wilson at 5,100. I actually kind of like Michael Carter at 5,200 on the Jets. He outsnapped Breece Hall 50-38 last week, but you look at his usage: 10 for 60 rushing. He had 9 targets last week. He had 7 catches of 40 yards. It's a nice game script for a running back who catch passes, because they should be they're underdogs to the Browns on the road. Cleveland did play McCaffrey pretty well last week, but that seemed like a weird game. I just think Carter's going to get a lot of dump offs in the second half. I think if you wanted to get cheap, I'd actually play Carter over Wilson this week, which is probably against the grain.
Yeah, and I like that call though. I think I agree with you there. Yeah, I didn't realize he had 9 targets last week, caught 7 balls. Yeah, for 5,200, and I remember he was doing similar things last year a few times. So yeah, that's a good call.
I like him with Flacco kind of dumping the ball off, trying not to get sacked, and I think they're going to be trailing. And I think more than anything, Michael Carter's really talented. So like, it's not just a dump off where it's they drop the ball off. It's 4
So what about the Chubb Michael Carter stack for all the money?
There you go. I like it. I like the way you're building this lab. It's going to be just all Jets and Browns. How can you really go wrong? So let's jump into receivers. We've kind of hit the expensive tier a little bit, but we have Cooper Kupp is 9,900 this week. Jamar Chase 8,000, Debo 7,800, Tyreek 7,100. What do you do with this range? I mean, obviously we've talked about how we like the mid-range running back most this week. Does that make you want to play an expensive receiver here? What do you think about this group here?
Yeah, I decided I'm going to eat the Adams chalk. So I'm gonna.
Yeah, obviously we talked about him, but he's obviously right in the middle of this range too. He's 8,600. Yeah.
I'm gonna have. Oh, sorry. Who are we?
Go ahead. I was just saying I didn't name him because we'd already talked about him.
Yeah, no, right. I mean, since I'm eating that chalk and since he's going to be very popular, the most popular receiver, I'm going to try to get like double or triple that. So he's going to be on a lot of my lineups. So really won't leave me much room up here. I like Kupp in Stafford stacks, but again, 9,900, that's a lot. Debo, I don't know. Like, I don't really want to play a $7,800 receiver with Lance, especially if the weather is going to be questionable. Tyreek Hill, I think, is interesting. He's Tyreek Hill, and he had 12 targets last week, and he can put up a big score for 7,100. So I think I could get some Tyreek Hill. What about you?
Yeah, we're not very different here, which doesn't make for interesting, but I agree. I think I'm just going to go Adams. Then if I play someone else here, it'd be Tyreek. I think that I like the 12 targets. They seem like they were really trying to get him involved. Mike McDaniel seems like he knows what he's doing a little bit, which is a good thing. It was a really good start last week. We talked about that game. I loved Miami against New England last week, and it worked out. We haven't really talked about. We talked a bunch about Mixon. What are you interested at all in the Bengals passing game this week, or is it more of a I think they're going to be up, and they threw 9 million passes last week, obviously, so it looked great. But Burrow had 5 turnovers. Chase is unbelievable. I don't know if you saw did you see the one-handed catch where his foot was just out of bounds?
I did.
Like would have been catch of the year, slam dunk.
Yeah.
Deontay Johnson had one like 90 seconds later too. That was unbelievable. Like these guys, Chase had 16 targets, 10 for 129, a touchdown. Had a touchdown they should have challenged. They got called back. Although who knows if he scores the second one if that doesn't happen.
Oh, Scott, you got me feeling the pain again. I watched every play of that game. I think it was the most brutal sweat you've ever had if you bet a side of that game. I had the Bengals in all of my parlays, teased down to -2.5. Now I realize I got lucky to get back into it, but Oh man, there were points when, and I had them in a ton of parlays, and they were the only one that missed. It hurt so bad. So
the wild thing about that is if they made the extra point, then you would have lost your
right. Oh my God, we went crazy when they missed. Yeah, so I got really lucky. I got lucky to even be in it, but still.
But then they miss it. Then they miss a 30-yard field goal with the second best kicker in the league. You're like, I got so lucky. We're finally here. Chip shot, and he freaking that's
right.
horrible. And then they didn't challenge that Chase touchdown, which is clearly a touchdown. I have no idea why Taylor didn't. I just started to bring up bad memories.
Yeah,
that game was
hurt so much because I was at the casino with two of my friends, and they also had Bengals in parlays as well. And it just so happened there was a family of Steeler fans also there, so it was just brutal hearing them, cheer every time, and we're just sitting there losing money. Anyways, I love Chase. This week, I don't know, 8K is a lot. I think the reason to play him though is because no one else is going to play him. Now, am I going to? I don't know. I think I might just because of that. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take one of my teams that has Mixon. You mentioned that 3 running backs in the flex looks pretty good this week, and I agree with you. So maybe one of my teams with Mixon, I'll find a way to get to Chase. We know he could score 2 first half touchdowns and 100 and some receiving yards.
If T. Higgins plays, are you less likely to play Chase? How do you work with that?
I don't know. Like if T. Higgins doesn't play, then Chase might end up gaining some popularity.
Right.
I don't know. I like him either way.
Okay. Fair enough. What about mid-range receivers? Say like the 6,000 to 7,000 range. There are so many names in this range. We talked about Cortland Sutton earlier, 6,100. Who do you find yourself kind of gravitating towards in this range? There's a lot of guys in here.
Yeah. Mike Evans, if Godwin is out, I think is a pretty good play. I know. Yeah, and Julio Jones might be out too. But in the past, I remember, I think it was even last season. Did the Bucks play the Saints in the playoffs last season?
I don't think the Saints made the playoffs last season, did they?
2 years ago, maybe then.
Yeah, maybe it could have been
2 years ago. Okay, and it was a regular season game. Anyways, 2 times recently, I remember fading Evans going up against Marshawn Lattimore, and he toasted him for huge games. And if Godwin's not there, and if Julio Jones is not there, this is one of those times where Evans can have 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I do like Evans. And then I'll save some of these other guys for you, but I like Cortland Sutton with my Broncos stacks.
I really like Cortland Sutton too. 6,100. He had 7 targets last week, 4 for 72. I know Judy caught the touchdown. I just think Sutton works really well with Wilson. He wants to throw the ball deep outside the numbers, and I think that really works well for Sutton game. But I'm going to be a broken record on this range until they move my guy out of this range. But Amon-Ra St. Brown, 6,500. He has 8 or more catches in 7 straight games. That's 1 short of an NFL record, believe it or not. He has a touchdown in 5 straight games. He had 12 targets last week, 8 for 64, and a touchdown. The Commanders have struggled against slot receivers. I think this lines up really well. It's the game with the second highest total. 6,500. I think Amon-Ra just kind of becomes all right, I'll put him in there and he'll be my mid-range guy, and then I'll build, whatever. But you always have room for one mid-range guy. I always find myself with one guy in this range. And, a Waddle's there, Marquise Brown, if you play a Raiders comeback, makes sense. People like McLaurin in this game, but I'm just going to go. Give me Amon-Ra 6,500. If he's going to keep rolling like this, Goff obviously just feeds him. I'm going to play him until they move him out of this range.
I like that. He just keeps doing it over and over again.
Yeah.
And people still don't like to click his name. So I think some of these other guys are going to be more popular. So yeah, keep playing Amon-Ra.
Yeah, I'm all for that. The 5,000s at receiver this week are stacked. There are a ton of names in this range. There's guys I like up and down. It's going to be hard to kind of parse through this range and figure out who to play and who not to play. Who are maybe the top couple of guys you like in this range? Because I found myself like bowling like 6 or 7 names in here.
Wow, yeah, stacked range. So I'll just take this really small range. We talked about Jerry Jeudy, 5,600. So yes, love him. But Christian Kirk, 5,700. Yeah, I think they're going to use him a ton. 12 targets. Trevor Lawrence looked good. They don't really have tight ends. I think he's going to keep seeing big targets. And then I'll stay in this range for a guy. I don't know. Maybe you were going to talk about this guy, but DJ Moore is like projecting well.
I would never talk about DJ Moore.
I know that's your guy. And sorry, what I'm going to say is I'm going to fade DJ Moore and I'm going to play Kirk and Judy in that range.
Okay.
I'll let you talk about this range now.
I'm going to play DJ Moore. I like DJ Moore in bounce back spots. He was 3 for 43 last week on 6 targets. I just think the guy is so insanely talented. 5,700. When I can get this talent, I think they're going to have to feed him a little bit more. They're facing the Giants. I like that spot for him. I do like Judy. Kirk had 12 targets last week. I didn't realize that until I looked a little closer. He was 6 for 117 very quietly. But I do like DJ Moore. What do you do with Deontay Johnson? Like, we talk about targets all the time. He had 12 last week, but the targets suck. Like, he was 7 for 55 last week on 12 targets, which, in PPR, at least he had the 7 catches, and you want targets in this range. But I just worry about this offense, how good the targets are going to be. And his best play was a 20-yard catch where he made a one-handed catch on the side, and there was a great play. I just wonder how good the targets are, but he's going to get fed. He's a tough guy for me to figure.
Yeah, me too. I think I'm with you, though. It's weird to say, but I almost think Big Ben is better for him than Mitch Trubisky. I worry about how good those targets are going to be as well. I just want to say for the record, I'm a big DJ Moore fan as well, but I worry that Sam Darnold might have been better for him than Baker Mayfield is.
Oh, man. If Sam Darnold's good for somebody, we might be in trouble there.
But yeah, no, go ahead.
If T. Higgins plays, 5,900 seems really cheap to me. I will have some T. Higgins if he plays. If he doesn't play, do you play some Tyler Boyd at 5,400, or you just kind of avoid and just play Chase and call it a day?
Yeah, it would make a lot of sense, but I think I don't know. It makes a lot of sense, but I don't really want to. I don't know. I'm with you, and if I'm picking a side, it's Mixon and the running game. I'm not trying to target. But if I was stacking that game, I don't know. I guess it would make sense maybe if you want to play Burrow, and I don't know. I don't really want to do it, Scott, I guess.
Fair enough. No, that's good. We want you to take a stand. That's good. What about the lower 5,000s? Some names down here. We talked about Allen Robinson a little bit, 5,500. He might see a bunch of AJ Terrell. They'll move, Cooper Kupp around in the slot. Tyler Boyd mentioned Drake London is at the Rams, 5,200. He might see some Jalen Ramsey, but he had 7 targets last week, 5 catches, 74 yards of the game. That should be trailing in against the Rams. And then down here a little bit lower, 5,100. If you're going to play Trey Lance, I think you've got to play Brandon Ayuk. 2 for 40 last week, only 2 targets. Again, in the monsoon, we'll have to check the weather. I just think Ayuk is who Lance looks for when he drops back. I know he had the 2 targets last week, but the game was weird. I think he has a good chemistry with Ayuk. I think that 5,100, I would play Ayuk over Debo this week for sure.
Let's go. Me too.
All right.
Yep. Lance and Ayuk. That's what I'm doing too in this range.
Yeah, I think it works. I think that they're going to have to switch up a little bit. Last week was so weird. I think this is the first week we'll actually see some real offense from them. Again, if it starts pouring and we're looking at the news on Sunday morning, it's pouring, I will get away from that game. It's one of those teams that if there's weather, I will get away because Shanahan will go run. If they get a lead, he'll go run. Even last week, they got the lead and then they caught up and they're still running the ball. So I do get it if you want to stay away from there. But I think if you're going to go a receiver there, I think it's Ayuk at 5,100. How do you feel about Allen Robinson? Are you an Allen Robinson guy? Are you out on this? What do you feel about after the brutal start?
I mean, that was worrying, but if enough people are off of him, I'm okay going back. I think I'm with you. I think those Stafford sacks are sneaky. The Rams are sneaky. So I'm not off Robinson yet, I guess is the answer. I mean, we saw what Robert Woods did in this offense, Odell Beckham. And I mean, Allen Robinson used to be good at least. He still might be good. So no, I'm not off yet.
At some point, some team out there has to just triple team Cooper Kupp and make someone else beat you, right? Like at some point, we've got to be like, you know what, I'm going to this game. Like this is what Belichick would do. He'd be like, you know what, we're going to figure this out, but Kupp's not going to beat me today. And I don't feel like any team does it. Maybe it's just they move him around so much. Maybe he's just that good. But man, if I were playing defense against this guy, I'd do everything I could to make someone else try and beat me.
Me too. Yeah.
And Stafford probably still forced the ball to him. He threw him a couple times last week in double, triple coverage. But man, I'd make someone else beat me.
Yeah, and just the last thing about Robinson, he's going to be less popular than most of the other guys we talked about. So, and it's another leverage play in this range.
Let's talk some cheap receivers, but first, a note from our sponsors at Monkey Knife Fight. Football is officially back on Monkey Knife Fight with all the NFL action you're looking for. And if college football is more your speed, they've got plenty of that too. On Monkey Knife Fight, there's no sharks, no salary caps, and no math. It's just easy to play, easy to win, daily fantasy player props. Join now at monkeyknifefight.com. You get your first game free, then use promo code RWNFL, that's RW like RotoWire, NFL, to get your first deposit match instantly up to $100. So what are you waiting for? Join Monkey Knife Fight today. I felt like last week we had a lot of cheap receivers with the pricing coming out a month early, a lot of rookies in there. Some of them worked out well. Jahan Dotson, who's down here, still had 2 touchdowns. Some of them did not work out well. So Kadarius Toney, who I really liked, had seven plays the whole game. It was very weird. I don't know if he got in the doghouse of Brian Dable at some point, but obviously was not involved in their game plan. So what about this week? We'll go 4,500 and below. What do you find yourself doing here to try and free up salary in other spaces?
Well, yeah, got to mention Dotson again. We talked about Curtis Samuel, and Dotson's 400 cheaper, and he caught 2 touchdowns last week. You think as a rookie that he should continue to get better. So that's a pretty good game to target. So I like going back to Dotson. Going a little bit lower. Mentioned Greg Dortch. I think he'll be the popular one, assuming that Rondale Moore's out, which I think he's going to be.
He hasn't practiced yet this week. I looked it up as we started. He has not practiced yet this week, so I think he's going to be out.
So, yeah, he'll be the popular one, and it just makes so much sense in Raider stacks. I mean, how easy is it to afford Devontae Adams if you pair him with Greg Dortch? Dortch had 9 targets last week. Now, he'll be chalky, so, that not chalky, but he'll be relatively popular. So that's a reason to fade. I'll let you talk about some guys, but got to mention Pickens because we mentioned him last week, and now he's 500 cheaper. I mean, the guy's just so talented. I wouldn't play Deontay for 5,800, but I'd play Pickens for 36 maybe.
Yeah, I mean, he had 3 targets last week. He was 1 for 3, so it was really ugly. But he did play 45 snaps. He was out there a lot, and I agree with you. I mean, I think if you're going to play a receiver here, you might as well play the really cheap one that obviously has some upside. You got to think at some point they're going to take some shots to him. But it was a weird game last week. They got up on the Bengals early. They had the pick 6, like on what was this Burrow's second pass of the game or whatever it was. Sorry to bring up the Bengals-Steelers game again, but he played a lot, and you got to figure maybe he's going to throw more this week. But I agree with you on Dortch. If you're playing that stack, it just makes too much sense at 3,500, 9 targets last week. But a couple other guys in this range. Zay Jones on Jacksonville was really involved last week. He's 4,300 in a game that should be a good game script. They should be trailing Indy, although it didn't work with Indy last week when they tied Houston. But not a bad floor for a guy that's in a good game script. Trevor Lawrence, which is a recurring theme, missed him in the end zone also. They had like 4 touchdowns they should have had in the end zone. He missed a couple, and then 2 were dropped. But he had 9 targets last week. He was 6 for 65. So I think Zay Jones is a kind of a boring play down here, but we'll see action. If he scores a touchdown, it really works well. A guy that 11 targets down here, Donovan Peoples-Jones on the Browns. He had 4,400. He was 6 for 60, 11 targets, and the Jets really got big by big plays last week. Devin Duvernay had 2 touchdowns. Rashad Bateman had the long one. They allowed 3 touchdowns to receivers on Baltimore last week. So, it's 4,400. It's a high risk play, but at 4,400, I think Peoples-Jones could hit a big one in this game. The problem is you got Jacoby Brissett throwing passes to him, which is always a problem. But 11 targets worked well. I like Dotson too. I think clearly looking for him in the red zone, which is really important. When you want someone cheap, you have a chance to score touchdowns. That's really big. But I'd probably go Dortch, Zay Jones, and Dotson to be the 3 guys that kind of cycle between in my lineups.
Yeah, I think I agree. I had Zay Jones written down as well. Just the last thing I'll say for like single entry and 3 max stuff, just smaller field stuff. You don't need these cheap guys to go off. I had Romeo Doubs in both my big lineups last week. And
funny you say that because I looked at your lineup and I was like, I bet you he didn't play Dot. And there he was. I mean, just saved so much money.
You're right. That 8 points was really all you needed because a 3K guy was the only way I could afford Mahomes, Jefferson, Kelsey, Saquon. So you just sometimes need those guys to do just a little bit if all of your expensive guys hit ceilings. So keep that in mind for single entry stuff.
Damn, that you had those 4 guys. That's great. That's a hell of a lineup. So you pretty much just didn't play the Chargers Raiders game then.
Yep. I just just took a stand. You know, Scott, I was tilted. I was very tilted after that Bengals game. I was very tilted, doing from losing the main slate already. And I was just like, I'm going to take a stand.
So are you in the casino watching games, like filling your lineups? That's a beautiful.
I was yesterday, and to be honest, I've never done it before, but yeah.
Were you just not gonna play the afternoon slate, but you're like, screw it, let's put a couple lineups in?
Well, yeah, actually, that was my plan because I basically had all Mahomes and Chiefs and afternoon guys anyways. Okay. So like sometimes that was my plan. I didn't, before in weeks past. Sometimes I'll just double down and go all in on the afternoon with similar lineups that I have in the main slate. And that's just not smart. You just play the same lineups in both slates, but yeah, it worked out.
So tight ends this week. Mark Andrews is the only guy over 6,400. Obviously, Kelsey off the slate. He played last night. Andrews was 5 for 52 on 7 targets Sunday. Did not work if you played him. Darren Waller, I think we agree, is going to be popular at 5,600. He was 4 for 78 on 6 targets. It looked healthy. Most importantly, signed that contract on Saturday morning. I was actually in Vegas doing the NFFC primetime draft, and the guy next to me took Waller, and he signed like 4 minutes later. I'm like, yeah, that worked. I think you got a happy tight end right now. Kelsey smoked Arizona last week, so I think a lot of people will be on that. We mentioned Kyle Pitts. I like Kyle Pitts again. I think I'm going to go back to him. Maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment here, but I think at 5,400, he's dropped in price. The talent, at some point, the talent has to play out there.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said.
What about cheaper tight ends? What are you doing kind of in the 3,000 and 4,000 this week? And I'm gonna let you go because I had Isaiah Likely last week and he dropped a goose egg, which did not work. He was 2,500 at least, but did not work.
I mean, I think it's gonna be boring. The two guys we talked about. I'm gonna use Albert O in some of my Broncos stacks. Yep. I'm gonna play Higbee if I play Stafford, and I'm gonna play Waller on some of my car teams. So I'm not really looking at many other tight ends. Other cheap guys that, I don't know. I had these Texans guys written down just because I was thinking about Broncos stacks. Like if Brevin Jordan were to miss, maybe you could take a chance on OJ Howard, but I don't know.
Back to OJ Howard. It feels like 2017.
Yeah, I don't think so. That just seems like a trap. I mean, unless you just know he's going to be out there for more than 12 plays. I don't know. You got to give me something down here, Scott.
For sure. I think that Pat Freiermuth works at 4,400, really active. We talked about how maybe Trubisky's hurting Deontay and George Pickens, but I think he works really well with Freiermuth. 10 targets last week, 5 for 75. Freiermuth led all tight ends in week 1 in target share, so I think that's a really good play. But the other guy I like to hear saves 1,000 from Freiermuth is actually Logan Thomas. We talked about the Washington-Detroit game, how it's a second highest over, and you got to find a piece from that game in here. I think Thomas might be my piece here. 3,400. He had 6 targets. It was his first game back from injury. Weren't totally sure how he looked. He played 62% of the plays. Really good sign there. Played 48 offensive snaps. 3 for 45. I think he's someone that not only can make a play in the middle of the field, but also will be targeted in the red zone if they get down there. I really like Thomas at 3,400. I think if I'm going to save some money here, so me, it's Waller in my car stack, and then kind of Freiermuth and Logan Thomas. If I do on the lineups, I'm not a glutton and play Kyle Pitts.
That's the one, Thomas. Yep, I'm going to play some Thomas. Thanks for that.
I like that. If you wanted to punt, I don't want to do it because Isaiah Likely hurt me here last week. But he played 53% of the pass routes. He had 2 targets, no catches. But Juwan Johnson in New Orleans is 2,500 this week. He had 5 targets last week. He ran a route on 80% of the Saints dropbacks last week. So he was out there a lot. He was 2 for 43. He's someone who used to be a wide receiver, I believe. So he's got some athleticism, not just a blocker. 5 targets last week. If you wanted to punt and you find yourself building a lineup, you're like, I just can't get cheaper elsewhere. I think Juwan Johnson, 2,500, is a guy that will catch a couple balls, maybe score a touchdown and work out really well. But 2,500, if I wanted to fully punt and save money, I play some Juwan Johnson this week in a lineup to kind of get the money elsewhere if I was building that way.
Yeah. That's I'm glad you brought him up. That's hard to ignore, and I would like him with maybe just run it back with Evans. You don't have to. Obviously, he's 2,500, but I think guys like him get a little bump if, let's say, Alvin Kamara is out. I see Kamara hasn't practiced yet, so that's like a few more little targets that are going to go other places, and he's only 2,500. Yeah, those are 2 really good shouts for the cheap tight ends.
Yeah, I like Juwan this week, but I'll probably go mostly Logan Thomas. I'll go cheap, but I think some Juwan if I need to save $1,000. That does matter. Defense this week. I didn't get a lot right last week, but Miami defense really worked out nicely. I enjoyed that fumble, scoop, and score. We mentioned earlier we never talk chalk with defense, but I think Cincinnati at 2,200 is just going. We had to mention it earlier because they're going to be so popular. Obviously, the price came out before Dak was ruled out and all that, so it's just kind of a freaky thing. But 2,200 against Cooper Rush, Cincy is a defense they can play too. It's not like we're playing, not like we're playing a horrible defense here. 2,200. So if you want to be different, and you're in a tournament, everybody's got Cincy. Where else are you going this week if you wanted to be a little different in the defensive side?
For me, I'm probably just going to stay in the same price range. I'm gonna have some Jets against Jacoby Brissett.
Yep.
And I think I'm gonna go right back to the Dolphins even against Lamar. I like sort of making the same lineup with the Bengals and then maybe just switching out the D to Jets or Dolphins D.
As we know, defenses are so variable, like one pick six, one bounce, and all of a sudden it's not like not like you're swapping out a quarterback at the same price. It's a defense, and we just, as much as we know with a defense, it's one bounce. You just never know.
Yep. So then as far as like defenses above that, yeah, I think that either Patriots or Steelers would be fine. I don't know. I was hoping you had one of these expensive defenses maybe you liked, your mid-range defense.
So you took one of mine with the Jets. I do really like that. I think the Jets are decent on D, and you give me against Jacoby Brissett, I'll take that anytime. I'm afraid that Cleveland's just going to run the ball 150 times with Hunt and Nick Chubb. So I don't like that as much, but I really like Pittsburgh. 2,800. Did it last week with Miami against Mac Jones. I don't think Mac Jones is good. I don't think the New England offense is good. I think Patricia and Joe Judge calling plays is an utter disaster. They looked like a mess last week, and I bet on Miami last week. I don't know if I can bet on Pittsburgh. They're kind of a tough bet this week coming off the win and Trubisky, but I like the Steelers D. 2,800. I think their D is really good too. You saw with Burrow, they forced 5 turnovers last week. I know some of that was Burrow playing bad, but they really got after him. I know Cincinnati's line has been much maligned, but they kind of seem like they fixed it. Clearly, they didn't through week 1. Pittsburgh was all over Burrow, especially early. I think under 3,000, I think on most lineups, I'm going to switch from Cincy to Pittsburgh to get a little different, 600 more. And I'm probably going to try. I like to fade defensive chalk when I can. I assume that Dallas is going to go super in a shell and try and, run Zeke, run Tony Pollard, a lot of dump offs, a lot of balls to Schultz, some stuff to land. But I don't really think they're going to be like taking a lot of shots. I don't love that from a defense. Granted, they may shut out Cooper Rush. Maybe he makes some mistakes in the second half, but I think Dallas goes in a shell. I really like Pittsburgh this week to give Mac Jones a lot of trouble.
Man, you're giving me all the extra ideas that I need. Yeah.
Beautiful. I love it.
Give me the Steelers too. I mean, they gave Burrow fits, and like, what are they going to do to Mac Jones? And that offense is not good. So yeah, give me the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh can play defense still. Who knows what's happened in that offense? And it was, last week was, even though they won the game, their offense didn't look great, but man, they can play some defense. If you're going above 3,000, say you had some money here, you want to play one of these defenses, the 49ers are home against Seattle, Denver's home against Houston, the Browns are home against the Jets, all in really, good matchups on paper. Do you have a favorite in there if you want to spend some money on defense among the three?
Yeah, I think I'd go with the 49ers. Their D-line's so good, and the Seahawks have like the 29th rated O-line. It was supposed to be one of the worst in the league coming into the season. It seems like a bounce back spot for San Fran. I could see Geno Smith turning it over. So I'll go with the 49ers. What about you?
It's a weird game because the Niners defense was utterly just killing the Bears offense. They were killing Justin Fields, and he had that play where Eric Armstead kind of missed him, and he threw all the way across the field. Both Hufanga and Fred Warner kind of bit on the running back or the quarterback running, and Dante Pettis is wide open. Of all people, the freaking Dante Pettis. Every time he makes a mistake, I rip on him, and he scores a 60-yard touchdown. And they just got weird after that. Like they had some good field position. They scored. It was just like this weird snowball, but man, the Niners defense was killing them the first half of that game. Seattle starts 2 rookie offensive tackles. Nick Bosa, Armstead, Drake Jackson, Ebu Khan. I think they're just gonna have to be pissed off. I think they're tired of this week. They must have heard so much crap this week. Their defense gave 3 straight scoring drives in the rain to Chicago, which is embarrassing. But Justin Fields had 8 completed passes. It's not like the Bears were doing a lot. They had some field position, a couple big plays, but I like the Niners against Seattle. I think they're going to have to. The defense line is going to have to dominate this game.
Yeah, agreed.
Again, weather, who knows what happens there? But if it rains a little bit, I'm just good playing a defense. Yeah, the other ones, I didn't love how the Broncos looked against Seattle, but they're probably working against Houston and the Browns and Jets.
I like Davis Mills.
Yeah, I think Davis Mills is serviceable. So I'm just if I had to go with one of the expensive ones, I think I'd probably go Pittsburgh mostly, but I'd probably jump up to the 49ers if I had to play. If I wanted to play one of these three to be a little different on defense.
Yeah, me too.
Anything else on your mind for this slate? I feel like we've kind of hit it all. I feel like I feel better about it than I did when we started, which is always a good thing. Chatting to usually formulate some good stuff in my head. Any other thoughts on your mind before we jump out of here?
No, I don't think so. It was nice. We were on the same page about pretty much everything. Yeah, I think we covered it.
Yeah. Any you're going to the casino again this week to watch games?
I think I am actually. You know what happened was, so we always used to go to my same friend's house, and he finally moved out and got a new place, but he hasn't moved into there yet. So we had nowhere to watch the games because I have, my little 1.5-year-old son here, and he goes to sleep early, and these games start at 6, and then they're at 9. And then my other buddy, his girl is actually pregnant. She's due in like a couple weeks, so we can't go there. So yeah, it looks like we're at the casino again, Scott.
I assume the casino's open all night so you can watch games. They go late.
It's great. And they have every game, multiple channels with Red Zone, 20, 30 TVs, plenty of space.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's nice.
You're obviously, for people who don't know, you're in Europe. Is like casinos like everybody watching games and fired up about football, or people mad?
Yeah, they're fired up because it's one of the only places, people aren't.
Right.
There's a lot of Americans there. It's people looking for NFL because it's not like it is here. So yeah, quite a few football fans and quite a few Americans.
That's awesome. So cool. Well, we appreciate everybody jumping on and watching and listening to the podcast as always. If you rate and review us, so we'd appreciate that too. Other than that, hope everybody has a really good DFS week too. Hope you all have as much luck and success as Ryan did last week. So hopefully it's good for the podcast. Someone doing well here. We love to see that. So hope everybody has a good week too. We'll back at you next Friday morning for week 3. Hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. Enjoy the games.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Good luck, everybody.